Hello, and welcome to another video. On this video, I'll be doing another explanation and ranking for Dawn of War Soulstorm Ultimate Apocalypse mod, but this time for the basic arranged units for each faction, in no specific order, putting the units into tiers from S, A, B, C, all the way down to F, listing out their stats and talking about their tactics and uses in gameplay, with my own personal thoughts and overall rating at the end of each segment. And I apologize if I get any of the information wrong. I'm reading mainly off of tooltips and, experience from the actual game, just gut feeling from years of playing the mod. And alrighty then, let's get on to the list. Battle Sisters, pre-elite ranged unit, faithful unit, effective against infantry and heavy infantry. HP is basic, squad size is standard, morale is basic, can capture points, and they are Crusader units, so they do bonus damage against demon type units. Cost is 180 resources and 2 population. Oh boy, the Sisters of Battle, the quote-unquote basic ranged unit of the Sisters of Battle, and they're also a pre-elite unit for some reason. So basically, right, they're overpowered. I'm not even going to beat around the bush. They can bully most other basic range units in the same tier 1 category, even on unupgraded. And the upgrades they do get from the upgrade building and their equipable weapons like the Storm Bolter help them considerably to even take down higher tier enemy infantry. They can also rush pretty easily due to their semi-low cost. And just from doing a lot of testing, I'm going to say that they're going to have to be an S tier. They might be actually legitimately the best starting basic range unit in the game. Just from playing a few matches against bots and just immediately rushing. I feel like they're one of the only units besides maybe Orcs or Chaos Marines that you can really totally rush down an enemy with. And if they don't have specifically anti-infantry on hand, or they already haven't gotten into tier 1 or 2, like 2 minutes into the game, by the time you get your infantry over there, they're not going to have a good time. So yeah, it's going to be a easy S tier for the Sisters of Battle, which they definitely need to rework. Blue Horrors, effective against infantry and heavy infantry. They are deep strike to ranged anti-infantry units. And I do not know why some of the stats are listed inconsistently on the tooltips. Sometimes they're going to be listed with numbers, and sometimes they're just going to be described as basic, average, etc. So for reference, I think the average value is a 2 on the number scale. So yeah, just keep that in mind for the future ones. Their HP is 3, their strength is 3.5, the morale is 2.5, upgrades are none, squad size is above standard, movement speed standard, capture points no, and they can be killed very easily if not under the possession of the warp or their morale gets depleted. The resource cost is 180 and they have a 3 population usage. The, I think, basic range unit of the Chaos Demons, I wasn't entirely sure. They're a bit more tanky and damaging and have a decent starting squad size, but the 3 population cost is annoying, and I'm pretty sure it's just something they put in so you couldn't rush with them. The average cost is fine, they have decent anti-infantry damage, but do not really do much against buildings or vehicles. They also die really quick to morale damaging weapons and anti-demon units both. You know, like Sisters of Battle and Inquisition Demon Hunters have a lot of anti-demon weapons. They're just not super notable, and you won't really see more than like 2 or 3 squads of them in a given game. Like the Deep Strike is nice too, but it's only within the sight range of the building, of the infantry building, and not map wide. No upgrades are available for them at all, which is also really bad. And with all of this in mind, they're gonna have to be C tier. The only thing keeping it from F is the HP and damage. They get replaced way too quickly, so don't even bother bringing them into the late game. They will not be able to hold their own weight at all. Chaos Space Marines, a basic ranged heavy infantry, able to be upgraded into an infiltrator. Contains training in both melee and ranged combat, effective against infantry and heavy infantry. Durability, good. Strength, average. Morale, average. Upgrades a lot. Starting squad size is 2. Movement is standard. Weapon range is long. Capture points, yes. 180 resource cost and 2 population. The basic ranged unit of the Chaos Space Marines. Good infantry, very much so. Average cost is nice. Good returns per combat, good special weapons, war gear, etc. Not as many support units as the regular Marine squad, as they only get access to a champion and a standard bearer. Very small starting squad size of 2, so you can't really rush with them super well, but you probably still can because they are tanky enough. I just have not really tried it. They are much more tanky than the average basic ranged unit and are decent, much more decent against something like a turret than a guardsman is going to be, or Eldar, etc. Even before upgrades, they are a great infantry unit and will probably still be used during the late game. The upgrade that makes them into infiltrators is a great bonus. They probably didn't even need that, and it is a little bit busted, kind of an overkill upgrade. Their war gear is really good. The melta-guns and plasma guns, missile launcher, heavy bolter, etc. The late game Valorite rifle, whatever it's called, the big, super expensive gun. It just melts through everything. And this is like, with a good amount of experience and testing, just using them over the years, they're gonna have to be an S tier. They are up there with the Sisters of Battle, but a little bit less powerful. But they're pretty much above every other basic ranged unit that isn't them or the Sisters of Battle. Excuse me, that isn't the Sisters of Battle. But you get what I mean. Right into S tier, yeah. Dark Eldar Warriors. Basic ranged unit. Effective versus infantry and heavy infantry. Durability is basic. Strength is basic. Morale is basic. Upgrades are few. Movement speed is standard. Capture points, yes. Cost is 220 resources and population use is 2. The basic range unit of the Dark Eldar. A bit costly for early game infantry. They don't do outstanding damage or anything, and only have a single leader option and 2 special weapons that all require the upgrade building to access. And the special weapons are both locked behind an upgrade too, I'm pretty sure. A low base squad size and really mad damage combined with high initial cost. I'm gonna have to put them into B tier. They're totally usable, but they just don't really have enough going on to care for beyond that, like most of the other basic range units at least do. It does fulfill an early game infantry unit role well enough though. Too expensive to rush with or anything, and the cost probably needs to be lowered to either 180 or 200 because I feel like they would be a lot better. I feel like they could possibly be, like on the higher tier B or like early A if they had a price reduction. Eldar Dire Avengers. Basic ranged unit. Effective versus infantry and heavy infantry. Durability is basic. Strength is basic. Morale is basic. Upgrades are few. Movement speed is standard. Capture points, yes. Cost 200 and population usage is 2. The basic ranged unit of the Eldar, which are just a reskin of the Dark Eldar or vice versa. They cost slightly less, have a slightly smaller unit size at max, I think, but can take heavy weapons platforms instead of just heavy weapons, which I don't think is as good as being able to have, 8 heavy weapons in a single squad compared to just, 1 or 2 heavy weapons platforms, which I think makes the Dark Eldar Warriors better overall. But the Dire Avengers are pretty even with them. pretty similar in actual in-game use. But they're personally the most forgettable of all of these basic range units, and like the most skippable next to the termagants. So they just slide into B tier. If I was just going off of personal opinions, I'd just throw them into C tier, but no. Now for the purposes of this ranking, they'll go right into B, next to all of the other average Joes. So good job being forgettable, Dire Avengers. Nobody really cared about you. Elite Stormtroopers, basic ranged unit, effective versus infantry. Durability 2.5, strength 2.5, morale 3, upgrades 4, squad size large, movement speed standard, capture points yes, cost is 200 resources, and population cost is 2. The more powerful and more expensive brother of the normal stormtroopers, they perform the same task as the normal stormtroopers of early map control, but better. With better HP and damage, they come with a much larger variety of equipable war gear, making them very flexible in an infantry role. And the large squad size is also a good bonus. They are honestly just a better version of the Imperial Guardsmen that has less war gear options, and they're also better than the normal stormtroopers. A solid A tier. Good to help hold the line till you can deploy some Grey Knights or vehicles to the enemy, while the variety of war gear helps them keep multiple types of low tier enemy units on their toes. So yeah, overall A tier and absolutely great unit. Tau Fire Warriors, basic ranged unit, can slow down enemy movement with suppressive fire slightly until upgraded with advanced weapons. Effective versus infantry and heavy infantry. Durability is basic, strength is average, morale is basic, upgrades are few, movement speed is standard, capture points yes, vision range poor, weapon range is long, cost is 210 resources, and population use is 2. The Tau Fire Warriors, the basic range unit of the Tau, a very complex and probably the most complex of the basic range units, function and meta-wise. They have a very long weapon range, but very poor nearsighted vision. So to even get any type of actual good use out of them, you need to have a friendly unit or building nearby whatever target you want it to lock onto. They combo well with the stealth suit starter unit, but basically can't get much done without extra nearby friendly structures or units to give them that line of sight to begin with. Another thing that makes them weak without that is the fact that their weapons are classified as heavy weapons and need a short time to deploy before shooting them. So running and gunning is completely off the table for them, which is a big downside and not something you want in a basic ranged unit that's meant for early map control and harassing. So you're forced to use them more defensively than you would other basic ranged units, unless you have a vehicle or something like a stealth suit be up in front giving them vision, then you can creep them up behind and have them be in an offensive role. The war gear they have, like the drones and pulse rifles, are pretty good, but doesn't add much in comparison to other basic range unit war gear options. They also have non-existent melee combat. I think one of the single worst melee combat scores, if not the worst of any basic range unit next to Guardsmen, and will be absolutely wiped like poop off the bottom of a boot by enemy melee units if they get caught up in melee combat. The range damage is pretty good, and I think it ignores a little bit of armor, or at least is more effective against vehicles than the average range unit. But when it comes to being an offensive unit, it's probably B or A tier, purely defensive, but for the purposes of comparing it to other starting units, and it not having the run and gun, gonna have to put it in C tier, along with the abysmal 5 feet in front of them sight range. That's just a crime, You're like forced to combo them with everything else if you want any use out of them. And since we're judging these units in a vacuum, yeah, they're going into C tier. Imperial Guardsmen, basic ranged unit, effective versus infantry and heavy infantry. Durability basic, strength, basic, morale, weak, upgrades, a lot, movement speed, standard, capture points, yes, cost 150, population usage is 2. The cheapest of the basic range unit lot. They're also the most squishy, with very low HP and have the weakest morale. Along with the basic las gun and bayonet, they're armed with being some of the weakest attacks of any units, and is basically consistent with trying to throw marshmallows at people to kill them. And it's probably one of the weakest attacks in the entire mod. They need to be kitted out with war gear to even ever be effective, unless you have them in massive numbers. And even with the numbers, the combined cost is probably not worth it in the long run compared to just going straight to card skins or getting Ogren in the later game. They're more like the Fire Warriors, where you want to kit them out with certain war gear, like stuff that specifically shreds vehicles and place them near a turret in a defensive stance, or use them just to get early map control and sit them by your control points rather than actually throw them at the enemy, because you're probably going to be getting more value out of them like that than using them offensively. They have the best war gear variety next to the Marine and Chaos Marine of any of the factions units, along with a really nice cost of only 150. And with everything considered from that, I'm going to have to give them B tier because the cost is low. You know, they're good to put next to turrets, but like offensively, they aren't going to last long. They have poor morale and will break constantly unless they're near a commissar and you get the morale upgrade from the upgrade station. And they also are really squishy and get chopped up by anti-infantry weapons, just like their starting unit cousins, the conscripts. So into B tier they go. Necron Warriors, basic ranged unit, able to be recalled back to structures, effective versus infantry and heavy infantry. Durability is basic, morale is non-applicable, upgrades are none, movement speed is very slow, and I think the slowest of any of these units. Squad size is below standard, capture points is no, cost is 60 power, and population use is 3. The sturdy basic range units of the Necrons. They're very slow, but are pretty hefty health-wise, and I think have a small amount of damage resistance against certain attacks. They can't capture points, but are good at running and gunning, and I mean, by running and gunning, I mean walking and gunning, since they're so slow, you know? And they also have pretty decent melee for a ranged focused unit. No war gear upgrades, and the only upgrades they do have are the ones at the upgrade building. They do pretty well for themselves for being a purely offensive unit. You can station them as a defensive unit too, but I think they work better, you know, in offensive situations. Even after the movement speed upgrades, which there are 2 of them, they're still going to be pretty slow, so you might want to put them into a cheap transport to move them around because, you know, they're super slow. Even with that, they're still pretty good at their actual role in combat. They do pretty decent against vehicles with their Gauss weapons too. Now, being able to capture points isn't really a bad thing given they're too slow to establish early map control even if they wanted to. The cheap price of 60 power is also very nice and only 3 times the price of the useless Scarab Swarms and 100% more effective than combat. A solid A or B tier all around if you understand how to use them properly, so I'm going to put them into A tier. Shoota Boys, the basic ranged unit, gain strength when in a horde of other orc boys, and could possibly increase resource income if in high enough number. Good against infantry, durability, basic, strength, basic, morale, basic, movement speed is standard, upgrades are a lot, squad size can be very large, capture points, yes, cost of 180 resource and a WOG resource cost of 4. The basic ranged units of the orcs. Low cost, but takes up 4 of the WOG resource. Can be a great rush unit, and is overall amazing early game infantry. Their shooters and big shooters pack a punch at close and medium range, but I think the accuracy falls off at longer ranges. They also have pretty decent HP for the cost and good melee damage for ranged units since they, still are orcs and they love their melee weapons. The pile of guns upgrade along with kitting them out with some big shooters is very effective against infantry even into the later stages of the game. Their only real weakness is that they have terrible matchup against vehicles, and they're not super good against structures either, due to having no anti-armor capabilities at all, as the big shooters are more of a anti-infantry thing. I wish you could upgrade them with rocket launchers, and I think it was like that in an earlier version of the game, but I think they changed it from being too overpowered or making tank busters irrelevant. They're still good at their job of running and gunning, capturing points, being anti-infantry. Their HP isn't super great though, but it's at least alright, before you get the upgrades. They do exactly what they're meant to do, very nice. And the horde bonus is a nice little cherry on top, because if you have, I think, at least 3 or more of them close together, they get some type of attack bonus, which could help with the rushing. So they're going right into A tier. Another great unit for the orcs. Termagant, basic ranged unit. Swarm unit provides nearby bonuses such as strength, HP regen, and production speed. Good against infantry. Increases the HP of everything else in your army by 1% for each unit fielded. Durability 2, strength 2, morale not applicable, upgrades none, squad size large, movement speed normal, capture points yes, cost 180 resources, and population cost 2. Not really much to say about them. Basic swarm infantry, only a cut above the Tyranid scouting unit, but still kind of just very mediocre swarm basic unit, going around capturing stuff type thing. Doesn't really do well against other basic infantry and gets fodderized by even low tier vehicles that have any sort of anti-infantry weapon on them. Also a little bit expensive for being basically a distraction unit that you forget about the moment you're able to start making warriors. They are more expensive than guardsmen but have similar HP and I think a little bit higher damage, and aren't nearly as flexible since they don't have any war gear. This is one of the other most skippable units in the game, next to the dire avengers, and feels like kind of a waste of money compared to just, producing a bunch of warriors instead. Overall, a C tier unit, not F, but almost an F tier. Being a swarm unit in an army that has so many other better swarm units is not a good look. Also, the 1% HP boost with the, more you field is basically useless, and I don't even know why that's a stat, because it's not even good as a gimmick. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't add anything to the viability of the unit, and you never really see it in action. If it was more like a 3% boost, then you might notice something after a while, but 1% is like, it's not really much if your unit has 1,400 health or something. Like, that's not gonna add anything at all. Anyway, it's a C tier unit. Tactical Marines, basic ranged unit, good against infantry and heavy infantry. Let me just make this quick because I know I will repeat pretty much everything I said about the Chaos Marines. They're basically reskins of each other and just about as good in gameplay. Good HP, good attack, war gear, upgrades, etc. Easy A tier. I do not put them in S because they don't have access to the infiltration upgrade and the various chaos buffs that the Chaos Marines get access to, as the infiltration upgrade is very powerful against armies that do not have a lot of infiltration detecting units, and you will still be using regular tactical Marines in late game like you would Chaos Marines, and I don't even think it's necessary to really get Stern Guard veterans if you have something like the Heroes add-on turned on and they get up to, veterancy rank 3 or higher, that's just how good they are. So, on to their weird, edgy cousin here in a second.
And now for something completely different.
Their edgy fire cousins that may or may not be demons. The Legionaries, a detector, Legion of the Damned pre-elite infantry, will regenerate HP quickly when not in combat, is free to reinforce but takes a long time to finish doing so. Effective versus morale and demons. HP is very good, attack damage is good, morale is non-applicable, upgrades in war gear is few, squad size is below average, and I think it's only 5 at maximum. Movement speed is very slow and I think slightly faster than Necron warriors. Their sight is further than average, their weapon range is long, they can capture points, and their cost is 270 resources with 3 population cost. The edgy demon versions of tactical marines, probably not fair to even compare them to any of the other basic range units on the list, since the Legion of the Damned as a whole is still a very much work in progress sort of thing on the mod developer's part, and is probably still being tested and tweaked. But basically they are a more powerful and tanky, but much more slow version of tactical marines that isn't nearly as flexible due to having less war gear options, and is also one of the slowest units in the entire game, like I said, next to the Necron warriors. From testing, they feel like they are an early game, an upgrade, kinda, but become a downgrade later because they're just not as flexible. They pack probably the most punch of unupgraded basic range units though, so I still give them a B tier at least. Maybe like high or middle B. And that'll do it for the list. You can take a look over the current tier list and as far as it's come, yada yada, etc, etc. See you next time for either something new or another ranking, which I'm thinking it'll be either heavy support options or basic vehicle options for each faction. So, until then, goodbye. And I apologize for any inaccuracies in this video, as I usually record the footage and audio months or weeks apart from each other due to my life circumstance and a state of being. So, yeah, once again, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.